guys in the dark.
I know that I'm the bad one in this relationship, but honestly, I don't care about it. I was talking to somebody for a couple of weeks, and I decided to meet with them in a public park. I just decided to go for it. Things weren't going very well in my marriage, and I was nostalgic for the good times my ex and I used to have together. Sex in my marriage is fine, but it takes me a little while for an orgasm, and most of the time with my husband, I don't get anywhere close to it. He knows that, and I think that it frustrates him, but I've always been that way. There are some big differences between my husband and my ex. My ex happens to have a type A personality and is pretty high-strung. My husband is more relaxed. He smokes pot and calls himself a dirty hippie. My ex likes to talk dirty in bed, and my husband basically prefers silence. With my ex, there's almost a consistent dialogue. Dirty talk is something that I've always done with other people in the past, so it's really stifling to me to be told, just hush, because you're ruining it. My husband happens to be average in size. Not small, but not big. But my ex is slightly above average. The size really doesn't have something to do with the time required for me to have an orgasm, though. My ex happens to be aggressive in bed. Things like hair pulling, spanking, things like that. That makes a really big difference to me. We make a lot of eye contact with each other, whereas my husband usually has his eyes closed. My husband happens to be skillful in bed, but not as aggressive. I've asked him to be, but he doesn't enjoy doing it, so I don't ask him very often. Sex with my ex is like the sex between Hannah and Adam during the first season of Girls. Sex with my husband feels good, but it doesn't leave me sweaty and breathless. I get the feeling that my husband wants a pillow princess who just lies there during sex and doesn't do much, which is not me at all. My husband can't text me while he's at work, but my ex has a job where he can text me all day, and he often sexts me. My husband works a physical, demanding job, so when he gets home, he's not really in the mood for sex. He only wants to do it on the weekends. So with my ex, it's a confidence booster, and it's not really a love affair, although I do care about him. It's more businesslike. We both want the same thing. For my husband to be able to perform, he has to be in a very specific mood, and also wants me to be in a certain mood. Sometimes I just want to screw, and not worry about what sex means emotionally. Being emotionally connected is an extremely important aspect of sex for my husband, whereas I'm more concerned with physical pleasures. There is a difference between people who's come of age with internet porn, like me and my ex, and people who haven't, like my husband. I definitely think that there's a difference between people who've come of age with it. I feel like it makes us more adventurous. We'll try things, even if it doesn't end up being something that works out for either of us. My husband had tried to watch it together, but he thinks my taste is too extreme, even though I have chosen something with Sasha Grey that I thought was pretty mainstream. He came of age in the 80s, and it's very apparent in the porn that he chooses. Like women with deep tans and spoofy 80s hair, and more pubic hair than I've ever seen in my life. Anyways, my ex has a girlfriend, and they don't live together, and she doesn't know that he's seeing me. I stalk both of them on Pinterest. I've noticed that he's been posting photos of grooms, and I suspect that they are getting engaged soon. I think that I'd be okay if he got engaged. I can't see myself being in a relationship with him anyways. I don't see him being faithful long term because he's been dating someone else the whole time that we've been seeing each other. Well, neither have you, you stupid bitch. I probably wouldn't have an affair in the first or second year of my marriage, but my resistance to the idea got worn down over time. I really do struggle with the fact that I made this commitment to my husband that's supposed to be for life. No shit. I told my husband at one point because the guilt got to me too much. He forgave me, but I've seen my ex a couple more times without telling my husband. If it did end completely, it might motivate me to work on my own marriage more. It's an easy cop-out. On the other hand, it has made me a little more tolerant in my own marriage. When you get sexually frustrated, it blends over other areas in your life. If I'm not, I can approach other aspects of our relationship in a more compassionate manner. If he does something that annoys me, I can't get mad. I just move on. I'm not the kind of person that you would find on Match.com or Ashley Madison. I have no interest in meeting somebody completely new. That's too much work. I have 3 children. I barely have time to get away as it is. My parents divorced, and it was kind of ugly. My grandmother told me my dad had an affair. To hear that at 7 years old made me look at my father completely different. If my kids had ever found out, I'd be completely devastated. Well, you should be. Right now, things with my ex are open-ended. We see each other if our schedule allows it. If it did end completely, it really would motivate me to work on my own relationship with my husband. I really do think if my husband and I had more time together, that would really help our marriage and our sex life. I don't even really remember the last time that we got out for a real date. I'd just like to get away for 3 or 4 days to have the honeymoon that we never got to have. Look, lady, you're gonna go cheat. Why don't you just divorce your husband and get with somebody else? You're stupid. I hope he finds out. I really don't remember the exact day Colin, which happens to not be his real name, became part of my life. A fleetingly glimpsed neighbor that I'd often nod to. I knew that he was a long-distance truck driver, and I think that he knew who I was. When our paths had crossed, he would seldom meet my gaze. I don't even remember the first time that I heard his name. A familiar voice uttered it, though my wife's. It wasn't by way of introduction, although years later I did wonder how that might have gone. Honey, have you seen that handsome man with the blonde hair, broad shoulders, and light tan who lives at number 18? His name's Colin. But no, rather mundanely she referred to him matter-of-factly in conversation. Colin took the remains of that old fence to the dump for me today. Honey, oh, by the way, Colin mended the lawnmower. Then he mowed the lawn for us. Colin was indeed the helpful friend who lived down the road. It is easier now to see that he was more astute people watcher than he seemed. He might have known that my job often took me abroad, and he probably had me profiled as a workaholic, as insensitive to my wife and her needs as I was trusting of her fidelity. But then again, we'd been married for some time and had 2 young children together. While I was away, my wife stayed at home taking care of the kids. I thought that we were happy, but in truth, I was too wrapped up in my job to even know. Life had gone on, and secretly day by day, it was written down. My wife was a meticulous diarist and spent about 20 minutes every day or evening logging the day's event. One afternoon, I walked into our bedroom and noticed that she had left her diary on the bed. This was unusual, but stranger still, it happened to be open. I went to go put it on the bedside drawer, but as I closed the pages, I caught sight of the word Colin. My immediate impulse was to slam the diary shut and try to forget that I had even seen his name before it had a chance to even sink in. Instead, I decided to start to read. The entries sketched back months, detailing their covert liaisons. Romantic, practical, but mostly sexual. The descriptions ranged from relatively tame, like kissing and cuddling today. It was lovely, to the kind of things that you'd get in the racier passages of a Mills and Boon novel. Nothing too graphic, but surprisingly comprehensive. My jaw ached with panic, and I felt the sudden flush of adrenaline. Of course, I had confronted her. I wanted to yell at her, but my anger was quickly changed by shock. I felt numb, confused, with tears in her eyes. She said that she hadn't been happy for many years, and that Colin provided an escape for her. At that moment, I didn't even know what to say. It was 4 or 5 hours before we could sit down and talk about it. We discussed the usual options, including divorce, but we decided to stay together for the sake of our children, make a fresh start. The next day, she told Colin that it was over. We didn't see him for a couple of weeks after that. He'd been driving his lorry to the continent, but Colin never did return. The news that he had gone missing on a ship presumed lost overboard was broken to us by his next-door neighbor. My wife's first reaction was stunned and disbelief, as was mine. Then she turned away and covered her mouth, trying to stifle any sobs that she had. Thoughts and emotions more tangled than ever. I tried to comfort her. Colin's death was confirmed by the positive identification of a body washed up on the beach. Some weeks later, my wife asked if we could drive to the crematorium so that she could lay some flowers and say her final farewells. It felt strange to me, but in the hope of her finding some kind of closure, I told myself that it was the right thing to do. Somehow, and completely irrational, I felt involved in his death, as if a personal timeline had been derailed on my behalf, and destiny rewritten to rescue a failed relationship. Slowly we tried to put it behind us, and his name was never mentioned again. A few years later, we had another child, and our marriage entered a new, happier phase. I vowed to be a more attentive husband and adjust my work-life balance, but I couldn't forget that affair, especially how close it had happened to my home. I should have trusted my instinct, because 12 years later, my wife had ran off with my best friend. Wow, how stupid can you get, dude? This happened on the 24th of December, 2013. I went out with my friends to a party. At about 9 p.m., my girlfriend, who's now my ex-girlfriend, called and said that she was at my house. I told her I was with my friends, and I will be coming back to the house tomorrow morning. She told me okay, that she'll stay inside and wait until then. I intended to stay at the party until dawn, but I decided to leave due to a terrible headache. I was exhausted. I felt I needed to rest. I left at about 11 p.m. When I got to my house, I was met with a shocker. My girlfriend was completely naked, and my dog was in between her legs, licking her down there. I stood there in shock, not knowing what to make of that ugly scene. "My God, what am I seeing?" I shouted at her. "It's not what you think," she said. "I'm naked because I needed to take some fresh air." To cut the story short, I had broken up with her, and then I sold the dog. She had been calling and sending text messages, begging me since then, though I didn't tell anybody about it because I don't want to tarnish her image. She is a very nice person, but deep inside my heart, I can no longer accept her. I can't put my thing in that hole once again. Never. But her words are really touching and disturbing, because she has sacrificed a lot in this relationship. She does love me deeply, that I know of, but this act, I really can't forgive or forget. On some Saturday morning in March of 2005, just a couple of hours after I caught my ex cheating on me, I got a visit from the police. The guy that she was with heard that I found out about them, and then called the police, concerned for her safety. She wasn't returning either of our calls. The police decided to check the house, my text message, to make sure that she wasn't in the house with me, and that I hadn't threatened her safety. I'm not a violent person, but that day, I had taken down all the paintings in our house and cut them to shreds in the garage. One of the cops stopped on the way out, turned to me and said, "I know what you're going through. I can see the kind of person that you are. You are legally within your right to do what you want in this house, so long as it doesn't interfere with your neighbor's well-being. But if you do tear this house apart, I can tell that you're the kind of person that's going to be feeling bad for it later on. She's not worth that." And then he just walked out. Funny thing is, his words had robbed me of all of my anger. I was pissed because I wanted to continue to be angry at her, but he was right about that. As emotional stability began to return, it hit me. I could still dismantle the house without damaging it. So I grabbed all of my tools, and in the subsequent 10 hours, I dismantled everything in the house that could be unscrewed. I spared nothing whatsoever. The kitchen appliances, all of our furniture in the study, in the 3 bedrooms, the dining room, den, and finally, the living room. I was very careful not to damage anything in that house. I neatly and gently stacked the parts and pieces I've dismantled, and then I put all the screws in a shoebox, and I took them with me. Now, if only I could see the look on her face when she decides to sit on that furniture once again. Because I say, screw that bitch. So I had walked in on her, giving a dude at a bar a handy on her birthday. When I confronted her later on about the possibility of our relationship not working out, she had thrown mugs at me, and finally tried hitting me with an IKEA end table. She threatened to beat herself up, and blame it on me if I broke up with her. Because in her own words, nobody would ever believe a loser like you. Whoever says men can't be abused in relationships are full of shit. This was 2 years ago. I'm still very uneasy about trusting women on dates, and I haven't been on a relationship that has lasted longer than 2 weeks since then. I keep coming back to that image of her giving him a handy, and I know that this is all mental, but deep down, I really can't get over this, especially since I really cared for this girl. So long story short, My wife had gotten a camera from me a few years back, and one day she decided that she was going to give back my camera, which she had taken on a vacation to go visit her parents with our 2-year-old child. I had noticed that the picture sequence had big gaps in the numberings. I decided to run an undelete program on my computer. Then I ran it on the card. I found 80 plus pictures of her naked with another guy in her mom's bedroom, some of which are pretty risque. Fuck my life, right? Now I have to confront her, and I'm going to divorce her.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.